I was drifting towards sleep, letting the quiet settle over the room the way it always did at the end of a long day. Beside me, Lucas breathed in that steady rhythm I'd come to know so well, the one that usually made me feel safe. But that night, something felt different, like the darkness had a pulse of its own. I shifted, pulling the blanket higher, trying to shake off the strange tension humming under my skin. Just as my thoughts began to fade, I heard a soft mumble break the silence. At first I thought I imagined it. Then he said it again, louder, clearer, and I felt every nerve in my body freeze. Sofia. Sofia, come here. My eyes shot open so fast it felt like someone had pulled a string inside me. I stared into the dark, waiting for my brain to make sense of what I'd just heard. Sofia? I didn't know a Sofia. Lucas certainly shouldn't be whispering her name in our bed. I felt my heart climbing up my throat, thudding in disbelief, in fear, in something that felt dangerously close to recognition. I nudged him before I could think twice, my hand shaking just enough to betray what I was feeling. Lucas! Lucas, wake up! Who is Sofia? He blinked at me like I was the one disturbing his peace, brushing it off with a quick, careless excuse. A client, a dream, nothing worth questioning. But as he rolled over, I stayed wide awake, listening to the truth echo louder than his voice ever could. I've been married to Lucas long enough to know when he's lying. And that night, when he whispered her name, something in me knew my life was about to split open. I laid there in the dark, staring at the ceiling like it was supposed to give me answers. Every time I shut my eyes, I heard that name again, slipping out of Lucas's mouth with a familiarity that stung deeper than any argument we'd ever had. My mind kept replaying the sound of it, the softness in his voice, the invitation hidden inside those whispered words. I tried to breathe slowly, tried to convince myself I was overreacting, but the tightness in my chest wouldn't budge. Something was wrong. I felt it the way you feel a storm coming, long before the clouds appear. I thought about all the little things I'd been brushing off for months, the tiny cracks forming in places I didn't want to look, the late meetings, the sudden privacy with his phone, the way he'd started pulling away from our conversations, leaving me talking to shadows instead of a husband. Maybe I should have paid attention sooner. Maybe I didn't want to. It's funny how we learn to silence our own instincts for the sake of keeping the peace. But hearing that name ripped the silence right out of me. It forced me to ask questions I didn't feel ready to ask. Lucas rolled over at one point, muttering something about an early morning, as if I should just follow his lead and forget everything. But I couldn't. I watched the faint glow of the streetlight crawl across the wall, marking the hours I spent wide awake, drowning in a mix of dread and clarity. By the time his alarm rang, I wasn't the same woman who'd gone to bed beside him. Something inside me had shifted, inch by inch, toward a truth I could no longer avoid. And as he got up that morning, I felt the first flicker of resolve forming quietly in the back of my mind. When Lucas finally woke up, he moved around the room with the same casual routine as always, humming softly while getting dressed. Watching him felt surreal, like I was looking at a stranger wearing my husband's face. He kissed my forehead out of habit, not affection, and I felt myself flinch before I could hide it. He didn't even notice. That hurt more than it should have. And when he said he'd be home late because of a client meeting, the lie slid off his tongue far too smoothly. I stood in the doorway as he rushed out, his tie crooked, his eyes avoiding mine. That avoidance told me more truth than he ever had. The moment the door clicked shut, the house felt colder, as if his absence exposed something I hadn't wanted to see. I walked back to the bedroom, replaying the night in my head, letting every detail sink in instead of pushing it down. A name whispered in the dark shouldn't break a marriage, but the way he denied it, the way he dismissed me, that was what cut deepest. That was what told me I needed to find answers. My heart was still pounding when I noticed his laptop on the desk, left open, glowing faintly like it was waiting for me. Lucas never forgot to close it. Never. I stood there for a long moment, feeling that quiet battle between fear and truth rising inside me. And then, with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, I stepped closer. I didn't know what I would find, or how much it would change, but something in me already knew the night's whisper wasn't just a dream. It was a warning. And I was finally ready to hear it. The next morning felt strangely hollow, as if the walls themselves were keeping secrets I still hadn't uncovered. I watched Lucas rush through his routine again, barely looking at me, barely breathing in my direction. He used to linger in the kitchen, touching my back as he passed, joking about burning the toast. But now he moved like someone trying to escape, and every hurried step made the knot in my stomach tighten. When he finally left, the silence he left behind felt almost accusing. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door he'd closed, wondering when exactly my marriage had become something I had to investigate. His laptop was still sitting on the desk from the night before, open just enough to glow in the corner of my vision. I tried to ignore it at first. I really did, but the memory of him whispering her name, that soft, intimate tone, pushed me forward. My heart raced as I walked toward it, each step heavy with a mix of dread and something sharper, the need for truth. I told myself I wasn't looking for pain. I was looking for clarity. When I sat down and the screen fully lit up, I felt my breath catch. His email was open, the inbox neat and organized, just like Lucas always kept it. But a folder caught my attention, tucked in between work projects, a harmless name that didn't match the company's naming standards. My fingers hovered over the mouse, trembling as I clicked. At first, I saw spreadsheets, documents, presentations, but then, buried under them, were messages, the kind that don't belong in a marriage, the kind that make your whole world shift in an instant. The first message hit me like a slap I never saw coming. Dinner last night was perfect. Can't stop thinking about you. I read it once, then again, hoping I had misunderstood the tone, the intent, the meaning behind every word. But there was no room for misinterpretation. It wasn't business, and it wasn't innocent. My heartbeat pounded so hard I could hear it, drowning out everything else around me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely scroll, yet I kept going, pulled forward by a truth I could no longer hide from. And there she was, Sofia. Her name glowing at the top of the messages, attached to reservation confirmations, voice notes, and pictures meant for him. A wine glass lifted. A hotel room mirror selfie, a table for two lit by soft yellow light. I felt something inside me crack, slowly and painfully, like a bone under too much pressure. I whispered her name out loud, trying to understand how someone I didn't even know had stepped so boldly into my life. The betrayal wasn't just in the messages, it was in every careful detail they'd tried to hide. My breathing turned shallow when I opened a folder labeled Project S. A project, he said. A client, he claimed. And yet, screen after screen told me he had turned company time, company money, and my trust into currency for an affair. I sat back, feeling my body go cold, my heart torn between devastation and something far more powerful: anger. A deep, slow-burning anger that rose from a place I had ignored for far too long. And as that anger settled in my chest, I realized I wasn't just uncovering lies. I was waking up. I kept scrolling, even when my vision blurred and my throat felt tight enough to close. Each new screenshot felt like another piece of my life being peeled away, exposing a version of Lucas I didn't recognize. Reservations for 2 on nights he'd told me he was exhausted. Receipts from hotels listed as client stays. Pictures of Sofia's hand brushing his across a table. I didn't need to hear another whispered name to know exactly what had been happening. The evidence sat right there in front of me, undeniable, unapologetic. I whispered to myself as I read, the way someone does when trying to stop from spiraling. So this is Sofia. Saying her name out loud made the betrayal feel heavier somehow, as if it settled into the air around me. My hands trembled so hard I had to place them flat on the desk just to steady my breath. Hurt sat in my chest like a stone, but beneath it, something else began to stir. A quiet determination. A strength I hadn't felt in a long time. I realized I was no longer the woman lying awake, confused, hoping for reassurance. I was someone searching for the truth, and finding it. And with every detail I uncovered, my heartbreak transformed, inch by inch, into clarity. I wasn't just a wife blindsided by an affair. I was a woman finally seeing what had been happening right under her roof. Lucas had built an entire story behind my back, and now he couldn't hide from it. I closed the laptop slowly, letting the weight of everything sink in. My world had cracked open, but not in the way he expected. Because in that quiet, shaking moment, I knew something with absolute certainty. I wasn't done. Not even close. I didn't confront him that morning. I couldn't. My anger was too raw, too sharp, like walking barefoot across broken glass. So I waited, watching him move around the house with a confidence he didn't deserve, humming while packing his work bag, trusting the same lies he'd been feeding me. When he said he had a client meeting that evening, the words rolled out so casually, as if he were talking to a stranger instead of a wife who had seen his messages. I nodded, pretending to believe him, even though the truth sat burning in my chest. All day I replayed the messages in my head, the photos, the reservations, the tone of his words when he wrote to her. I didn't want to sit in my pain anymore. I wanted answers, and I wanted them from his own actions, not his excuses. By late afternoon, I felt that same quiet determination I'd found the night before settling into place. I grabbed my coat, my keys, and a version of myself I thought I had lost years ago, the one who wouldn't be lied to twice. I parked across the street from the restaurant he had taken her to before, the same one from the receipts in his hidden folder. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the windows, making the place look romantic, intimate. It made me sick just imagining them together inside. And then I saw him. Lucas walked right through the front doors, not even checking his surroundings, confident in his cover story. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from a rising certainty that the truth was about to unfold right in front of me. A few minutes later, she appeared, Sofia. Younger than I expected, elegant in that effortless way that comes from knowing someone is waiting for you. I watched her smooth her hair, adjust her dress, and walk toward the entrance with a smile that told me everything I needed to know. There was no hesitation, no guilt, no second-guessing. She belonged to the world Lucas had built behind my back. Seeing her made my stomach twist, but it also sharpened something in me. I wasn't imagining anything. I wasn't overreacting. This was real. When she stepped inside, I counted to 10, letting my anger settle into something cool and steady. I didn't want to walk in shaking or crying. I wanted to walk in knowing exactly who I was, a woman who had loved, trusted, and been lied to. I opened the door, and the warm light spilled over me, blending with the quiet chatter of people enjoying their dinners. My heels echoed across the floor, and every step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself Lucas had carelessly discarded. When our eyes finally met, his face went pale, like he'd seen a ghost. He stood up so fast his chair nearly toppled behind him. "Emma? What are you doing here?" he stammered, his voice cracking the way lies do when they're exposed under bright lights. Sofia froze, her smile dissolving as she looked between us. I felt a strange calm wash over me, the kind that comes when truth has nowhere left to hide. I didn't raise my voice yet. I didn't need to. I simply let the moment stretch, letting both of them realize that whatever story they had been telling themselves was about to fall apart. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized he wasn't shocked because he felt guilty. He was shocked because he finally lost control of the lie. "Oh, don't mind me," I said, letting my voice carry just enough for nearby tables to hear. "I just wanted to meet your client. After all, you talked to her in your sleep." The color drained from his face, spreading in slow, humiliating waves. Sofia blinked, her expression tightening as the truth began rearranging itself inside her mind. Whatever story Lucas had told her, it was collapsing in real time. "Lucas, you said you were separated," she whispered, stepping back as if distance might soften the blow. Her voice cracked, and for a brief second, I saw confusion replace her confidence. I laughed, not out of amusement, but out of disbelief that he'd built lies on top of lies, handing each of us a script while he starred in his own secret fantasy. "Separated?" I repeated. "That must be news to me." A few diners glanced over, forks suspended midair. The room felt electric, charged with the weight of the truth unraveling right in front of them. Lucas reached out, desperate, his voice low and frantic. "Emma, please, let's talk outside." But there was no outside conversation that would fix this, no quiet hallway where he could smooth over what he'd done. I lifted my chin and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Why? So you can lie again? Everyone here should know you cheat on your wife and blame it on dreams." The entire restaurant fell silent, a sharp, breathless silence that wrapped around us. Sofia grabbed her purse with trembling hands and stormed out, leaving Lucas standing there, exposed, cornered, and finally out of excuses. I drove home that night with my heart pounding in a rhythm I didn't recognize. Not fear, not sadness, but something sharper, something steady. The restaurant scene replayed in my mind like a film I couldn't pause, each detail reminding me that Lucas had created this disaster with his own hands. When I walked into the house, the air felt different, almost cleaner, as if the truth had finally forced its way in. I turned on the lamp in the living room, sat down, and waited. Not as a wife fearing a confrontation, but as a woman who had finally seen enough. Hours passed before I heard his keys scrape against the lock. He stepped inside loudly, the way guilty people do when they need to pretend they're still in control. His face was tight, flushed with anger, not remorse. "You humiliated me tonight," he shouted, like he was the victim of the chaos he created. I watched him pace, watched the panic flicker behind the fury, and for the first time, I didn't shrink under his voice. I didn't apologize. I didn't even flinch. I just stood there, grounded in a strength I didn't know I still had. "You humiliated yourself the moment you whispered her name in my bed," I said, my voice steady enough to make him stop pacing. His expression shifted, a mix of shock and desperation, as if he hadn't expected me to fight back. He tried to soften then, lowering his tone, reaching for the version of himself that once charmed me. "It meant nothing," he pleaded. "Please, Emma, don't throw this away." But I wasn't moved. I could feel something changing inside me, a calm clarity rising above the noise of his excuses. I wasn't the woman he'd lied to last night, and I wasn't about to be her ever again. I walked past him slowly, giving myself a moment to breathe, to settle the storm inside me into something quiet and controlled. "I'm not throwing anything away," I said, turning back to face him. "I'm taking back what's mine." The confusion in his eyes told me he still didn't understand that the woman standing in front of him wasn't clinging to a broken marriage. She was reclaiming her power. He opened his mouth to protest, but I raised a hand, silencing him for the first time in our entire relationship. That silence felt like a small victory. Then I reached for my phone. His eyes narrowed with suspicion as I unlocked it, tapped the screen, and played the recording of him whispering her name. "Sofia, come here." His own voice filled the room, echoing back at him with an intimacy he could no longer deny. He paled, his jaw tightening as he realized I hadn't come unprepared. Before he could speak, I played the second recording, the one from the restaurant, the one where he begged me to step outside while the truth was spilling out in front of everyone. His lies, his panic, his affair, all captured. "Emma, stop," he pleaded, reaching toward me like I was something he still had a right to hold on to. But I stepped back and opened my laptop instead. With one click, I sent all the files, his sleep-talking, the photos, the reservations, the confrontation, straight to his boss. "If you're going to use your company's money and time to cheat," I said, my voice calm, "you should at least be prepared for the consequences." The moment the email whooshed out of my outbox, I watched the last bit of control slip from his face, and something in me felt steadier than ever. Lucas stared at me like the ground had just shifted beneath him, his anger melting into something far more fragile. Fear. Real fear. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing, muttering half-formed excuses as if any combination of words could undo what he'd done. "Emma, you don't understand," he said, his voice cracking around the edges. But I did understand. I understood perfectly. I stood there watching him unravel, watching the man who had once carried himself with so much confidence suddenly look small. And strangely, I felt nothing but clarity. He grabbed his phone, hands shaking, checking his emails as if he could somehow stop what I'd already sent. When he saw the message sitting in his outbox, delivered and read, his shoulders dropped. His voice broke into a whisper. "Why would you do this?" The question was so absurd, I actually laughed. "You ruined our marriage long before I hit send," I replied. My words hung in the air between us, heavy and undeniable. It wasn't revenge for the sake of revenge. It was accountability, the kind he never thought would reach him. He sat down on the edge of the sofa, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like he was trying to find a version of the truth that wouldn't destroy him. But destruction wasn't mine to control anymore. He had set that in motion long before tonight. I watched him crumble, watched the weight of consequences settle onto him for the first time in his life. And yet, as I stood there, something inside me shifted again. Not toward pity, but toward a strange, unexpected calm. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of the fallout. It was only the beginning. The next morning arrived colder than it should have, as if the world itself sensed what was coming. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard his phone ring in the other room, a sharp, tense sound that cut through the quiet like a blade. Lucas answered it too quickly, and I could tell from the shaking in his voice that it wasn't good news. I leaned against the counter, listening to the muffled conversation unravel on the other side of the wall. The silence between each sentence told me more than his words ever could. 5 minutes later, he walked into the kitchen looking like a man who'd been hollowed out from the inside. His face was ashen, his eyes wide, his breath choppy. "They fired me," he said, as if saying it out loud might make it less real. Misconduct, misuse of company funds, violating multiple policies. Every consequence lined up neatly, matching every lie he'd told me. I didn't say anything at first. I just watched him. Really watched him. And it hit me how different we were now. He was collapsing, and I was finally standing upright. He slammed his fist on the table, desperate, furious, clinging to any last shred of control. "You got me fired. Emma, please, don't do this. I need you." His voice cracked on the word need, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty for not softening. I stepped closer, not out of comfort, but out of certainty. "Funny," I said. "You didn't need me when you were whispering Sofia's name." His face twisted, a mix of shame and disbelief, like he couldn't understand that the consequences had finally reached him. And somehow, I felt a strange, steady peace rising inside me. He kept pacing, his hands pulling at his hair as if panic might somehow untangle the mess he'd created. "We can fix this," he insisted, desperation dripping from every word. It was almost startling to see him like that, the same man who had once been so sure of himself now clinging to ruined pieces as if they might magically fit together again. I watched him ramble, blame shift, rewrite the story in real time, searching for a version where I stayed. But I didn't recognize the woman who would stay with him anymore. She wasn't me. I walked past him and opened the closet, the one we used to share, pulling out the suitcase he always took on business trips. The irony didn't escape me. I set it on the bed and unzipped it calmly while he stared at me like I'd betrayed him. "Emma, what are you doing?" he demanded, his voice cracking as he reached for my arm. I stepped away. "I'm doing what you should have done a long time ago," I said. "I'm choosing honesty, and honesty means you don't get to stay here anymore." His breathing quickened, uneven and frantic. One by one, I folded his clothes and placed them inside the suitcase, not with anger, not with theatrics, but with a strange sense of finality. Every shirt, every pair of shoes felt like another door closing. He watched me silently now, and for the first time, he looked small. Not because I wanted him to, but because the truth had stripped him bare. When I finally zipped the suitcase shut, the sound echoed through the room like a full stop at the end of a sentence we'd both tried too long to rewrite, and I knew exactly what needed to happen next. I handed him the suitcase with a calmness that surprised even me, not the trembling, heartbroken calm of someone trying to save what was already dead, but the grounded, unshakable calm of someone who finally chose herself. "Get out, Lucas," I said, meeting his eyes without flinching. "And take your dreams, and Sofia, with you." For a moment he just stood there, blinking, as if the words hadn't fully landed. But when they did, his shoulders sagged, and I watched the last bit of denial drain out of him like water slipping through open fingers. He tried one last time, a whisper, barely audible. "Emma, please." But it wasn't a plea for love. It was a plea for comfort, for stability, for the woman who once carried the emotional weight he never wanted to hold. And that woman wasn't here anymore. I opened the door, feeling the cool air rush in, carrying away the remnants of the life he had shattered. He walked out slowly, dragging the suitcase behind him, each step sounding like the fading echo of a man who finally realized the cost of his own betrayal. I didn't follow him. I didn't need to. When the door clicked shut, a stillness filled the house. Not emptiness, not loneliness, but freedom. Real freedom. I leaned my forehead against the wood for a moment, breathing in deeply, letting the quiet settle into every corner of my chest. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something like peace rise inside me. A peace that didn't depend on anyone's promises. A peace that wasn't borrowed or begged for. A peace I had earned. His downfall wasn't my victory. My liberation was. And as I walked back inside, I knew this wasn't the end of my story. It was finally the beginning.